Hey everyone, this is Jonathan, back with another video, and today I'm excited to talk to you about how you can go and crush your on-site or virtual on-site interview. If you looked at my last video, I talked about how to get a job by leveraging your network and outreaching to different people. Now I'm going to talk to you about when you get some of those opportunities rolling in, how do you make an excellent first impression and how do you stand out as a candidate? I'm excited to go through with this. Let's get into it. So for my first tip, the thing that I wanted to recommend is to make sure that you are prepared, or some of my friends say, come correct. Make sure that when you're going into an interview, you know exactly the role and the company and who you're interviewing with. Now, there are a couple things and approaches to this. The first is to absolutely study the job description. Make sure that you know why you're qualified and talk about why you'd be a great fit for the role. I mentioned this when I talked about how to ace a phone screen, and I cannot emphasize this enough and actually want to emphasize it more, especially at the on-site stage. Remember, this is probably the last stage before you actually get extended an offer. So you want to make sure that you come prepared. In addition to that, you also want to make sure that you can potentially research who you're interviewing with. Now, if you're working with a recruiter, either from the company or from a third-party agency, you can usually ask them who your panel is going to be. Then once you find that out, make sure you go and do your research on LinkedIn. How long have these people been at the company? Where were they at previously? What school did they go to? Different things like that can really help you make a great lasting impression and come into your interview a lot more prepared. You never know if maybe you and one of your interviewers went to the same school and you can connect as alumni. So I definitely want to make sure that I emphasize this. Make sure you come prepared. Make sure that you come in ready to go, knowing about the role, the company, and who you're talking to. In addition to this tip, the thing I would recommend is to actually look up online forums on interviews at certain companies. So specifically when I think of Glassdoor and Blind is more specific to technical people, but there are a lot of different websites like that. Now take these with a grain of salt because there are a lot of people that get rejected that just start to badmouth a company, and that might not be the experience at all. I know I've had to deal with that for sure. But they can be great ways for you to see what's the structure of the interview like, what are some of the questions they may ask. And this is just gives you a lot more confidence going into an interview that you can feel prepared. So if you haven't done that and you have an interview coming up, look on Glassdoor, look on Blind, see if there's any information on the types of interviews and what they're doing for your role. So the second tip that I want to recommend is to make sure that you answer questions correctly, or more so in the proper format. Now, Jonathan, everyone wants to answer a question correctly. But the way that you break down a question can really change the way that you make an impact on the interviewer. And I've mentioned this before in my phone screen videos, but as I want to emphasize this again, the SAR method: situation, action, result. This is especially good when you're talking about name a time. So I'll give you an example. So Jonathan, name a time when you couldn't figure out how to fill a role. Well, there was this one time where I was trying to hire for a senior software engineer and I wasn't able to hire this role for about 3 months. So what I decided to do was I decided to have 5 hiring managers post the role on their LinkedIns in hopes that we would either get a referral or more inbound. From there, we saw a 15% increase in applications. One of those applicants ended up being our hire. This was great because we were able to see that through our hiring manager engagement, we were actually able to find this hire. And so that's a great example. I kind of walked through what the situation was, what was the action, and what was the result of that. Being able to answer questions like this can really make the difference when you're interviewing. So I highly recommend, if you're not familiar with this, practice this at home. Practice this with your roommate, your parents, your family, anything along those lines. But I can assure you that if you go about answering questions in this method, it will definitely lead to better results. The third tip that I want to recommend is to make sure to prepare for the unexpected. Now, what does that look like? Well, you may get asked a question where you didn't even think of this answer. You may have prepared for this interview for hours and they ask you a curveball question and you're like, I don't know what to say in this. Well, there are a couple different hacks that I've used when interviewing, and I've definitely given this advice to other people, that can allow you to give a little more time to be able to help kind of center yourself. So the first one is a bottle of water. That's a weird tip, and why is that? Well, a bottle of water is a great way to be able to give yourself a breath if you're trying to think of an answer to a question. So if someone asks me a curveball question, one way I might reply to that is, that's a great question. I take a sip of my water. That gives me 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 6 seconds to be able to think of an answer. Maybe not 6 seconds. If you're drinking water that long, you give it away. But the point is that it gives you a little bit more time to be able to give yourself a breath. And so this is something I definitely recommend. If you're talking for a long time, you're feeling yourself feeling mentally exhausted, make sure that you bring a bottle of water so that if you need a little bit of a recharge, even those couple seconds, it can help construct your answer in a better way. In addition to that, I also recommend, this is specifically for in person, but always bring a couple copies of your resume. You never know if someone doesn't have a copy of your resume. They may have forgot it, they may have been coming back from a meeting. And if you're able to show that to them right away, then it just allows you to not have a curveball. Resumes are usually the ways that interviewers guide the actual interview. Usually they'll talk about, so what did you do at this company? What did you do at that company? So just make sure that you come prepared. You never know what could happen in general. So the final tip that I want to recommend and provide to you guys is to make sure that you follow up. Now, this is a bit old school, but I am definitely a believer in following up. When candidates have an interview and they don't follow up, there are some interviewers where they're like, well, I didn't appreciate that he didn't follow up, especially if they've interviewed other people and they haven't followed up. So what does that look like? Well, you can just ask the recruiter or your point of contact, hey, would you mind if I get the interviewer's email addresses? Now, they may or may not give that to you, and that's okay. But then what you could do is with your point of contact, if they didn't give you those email addresses, just email them and say, hey, this is a great time. I really appreciated learning insights about this company. It was really awesome, and I'm definitely looking forward to hearing back the results. Please extend this to the hiring managers. Now, this just makes a better impression. It just shows that you're interested, it shows that you're eager, and it shows that you're grateful for their time and the opportunity. In addition to that, when it comes to follow-up in general, if you haven't heard back for a couple days, make sure to follow up. Show that you're still interested. Show that you're definitely, wanting this role and that you can see yourself working that company. So this is my final tip. Make sure you follow up. Make sure you follow up. Make sure you follow up. Well, if you've made it this far through the video, thank you so much for your time. I always appreciate it. I hope that you found these tips helpful. Please, if you haven't, give it a like, subscribe. It helps the YouTube algorithm, which helps me, which helps more people. So I appreciate your time. Thank you guys so much.